Hello there, good morning and welcome to Rising. So glad you decided to watch our lovely show on this beautiful Wednesday day in the nation's capital.
It is always a delight to be here with you, Robby, and plenty to discuss as we always do. So let's get started. What is on your radar?
Happy to tell you, Niall. Here's a poll result that definitely surprised some people. According to the latest from Emerson College, 41% of young people, that is respondents between the ages of 18 and 29, find the killing of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson to be acceptable, either somewhat acceptable or completely acceptable. Now, these findings were at odds with respondents overall. 68% of people from all age groups said that the actions allegedly taken by accused killer Luigi Mangione were unacceptable. And look, I understand why many Americans are frustrated with the healthcare system. I'm frustrated as well. These frustrations are not partisan. Democrats and Republicans and independents alike all understand that the cost of the medical care in the United States is just crazy relative to the benefits we are getting. Now, we disagree on the solutions. We disagree, for instance, on whether getting the government more involved would bring down costs or actually just make the problem worse. But the impulse to dislike how bureaucrats and middle managers, both from the private sphere and the public sphere, have saddled people with out-of-control medical costs is perfectly normal. That does not mean, however, that it's acceptable to kill the CEO of a healthcare company. It's not acceptable to kill any CEO or any political figure or anyone at all, except in self-defense. That's why there is no comparison, despite what some on MSNBC are saying, no comparison between Luigi Mangione, who allegedly gunned down Thompson, and Daniel Penny, who defended his actions on grounds that placing Jordan Neely in a chokehold was preventing violence and harm. Now, many liberals have argued that Penny's actions went beyond merely behaving in the defense of others. The jury ultimately disagreed with that. But in contrast, no one could argue that Mangione's alleged murder of Thompson was acting in anyone's self-defense. The murder will not change the policies of the healthcare company. Thompson will be replaced by someone who does the same job. Americans should advocate for better, more compassionate, more affordable healthcare coverage and reforms to the system. But we should never, ever find ourselves condoning cold-blooded murder. That impulse is to be condemned. Yet far from being condemned, the impulse is being celebrated by some people who've gone so far as to donate to Mangione's legal defense. Here's what his lawyer said about that during a recent interview on CNN.
I have received some emails. I have not seen them personally, but my understanding from my staff is people are doing that.
The people are reaching out to you and offering to help pay for his legal bills.
That's correct.
Would you accept those offers? I mean, I imagine you maybe have, I don't know, have you ever gotten that before?
Nah, to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't.
Why do you think you would not accept that?
I don't know. I just I don't know. I just don't feel comfortable about that. So I don't know. I haven't given that much thought, but I'm not looking, obviously my client appreciates the support that he has, but I don't know. I just, I'd have to look in, but it just doesn't sit right with me, really.
Why do you think they're offering?
I don't know. People, you talk about, the Supreme Court says, all these rich billionaires can give all kind of money to candidates, and that's free speech. So maybe these people are exercising their right to free speech and saying that's the way they're supporting my client.
Look, that was not a bad point. He's certainly not wrong to note that people have the right to do exactly what they're doing, to give money to Luigi Mangione. Now, the latest news is that Luigi Mangione is being charged not merely with murder, but also with terrorism. Prosecutors argued that he, quote, intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population and to, quote, affect the conduct of a unit of government by murder. Widespread sympathy for Mangione among young people is no doubt influencing the prosecutor's decision here. And while I absolutely agree that Mangione should be brought to justice for his alleged crimes, but in terms of also having due process, of course, the terrorism label sticks out to me, as it frequently does, as confusing. As independent journalist Michael Tracy argues, prosecutors have been pointlessly empowered with a huge array of purposely vague terrorism statutes as though they wouldn't otherwise be able to criminalize murder. I agree. Terrorism has become an all too slippery term that forces us to try to judge whether one killing is more heinous than another, whether violence is being utilized as part of a coherent strategy or political ideology, or whether it's the result of mental illness or personal vendetta, when it's myriad things. Mangione is an accused murderer. He deserves due process. He should get his day in court. No one should idolize him or the actions that he took. And a society that celebrates this kind of thing is rotten to its core. We also do not need to pretend that every crime, every act of violence should have us on high alert for terroristic plots or should make us more inclined to give up our precious civil liberties, which the government has already seen too much of that happening. The government has the tools they need to exact justice in this case.
A lot of ground covered there, Robby, a lot of different components to this case and components to the public reaction to it. I think the point where we probably disagree or diverge, at least, isn't in I'm not endorsing Thompson's killing. I don't think it is a good idea for people to walk around murdering other people. I think I maybe I'm more sympathetic to the public anger about health insurance companies and the way that they conduct their business and the idea that it is often just very callous, very greedy, very manipulative, and also that they try to wriggle out of the obligations that their product should impose upon them. They're essentially, selling very expensive buckets with the holes in the bottom when it comes to actually claims. Now, again, that does not justify the murder of Brian Thompson. We'll see Luigi Mangione, we think, is going to plead not guilty. He'll have his day in court. The point, though, that I think we've perhaps most common ground on is the terrorism thing, which does seem a very peculiar definition of this case to me. I think most of us think of terrorism either in a sort of, as a broader cause than simply, I have a vendetta against a certain person in business or a certain type of person in business, and much more about armed groups taking action of one kind or another. And there are obviously dangers to civil liberties in the expansion of anti-terrorism powers or in the expansion of the definition of terrorism to include things like this.
Certainly, and this goes to points I make about hate crimes, because then we have to understand, we have to know exactly why he did this, and then that makes it much, much worse if it's for this reason but not this reason. That always does not quite sit right with me. The result is the same. A man was gunned down on the street, and that is wrong and he should be convicted of it if he's guilty and if the evidence is compelling. And then whether his motive, what was his state of mind as he was doing it? Is it because he's just crazy, or is it a personal vendetta against the healthcare system? Is that part of an ideology? If the manifesto was longer and more elaborate, that suddenly makes it part of a coherent, view of how social change is supposed to work. It just seems so strange to me to bother obsessing it over that much. I think the human brain hungers for explanation, and when sometimes violence is a little bit inexplicable, and you can't, and healthy, well-adjusted people don't usually do this kind of thing, and so you're trying to understand something that is intrinsically, that lacks the kind of carefully thought out, these dominoes fell and then I ended up like this.
And the other point I think there is, on the topic of sort of civil liberties in general, the idea that these kind of attitudes are defined as terrorism. Yesterday on Rising, we had Ken Klippenstein on talking about both the idea of there being a hotline specifically for business executives, which doesn't sit right with me, but he also mentioned in passing this case in Florida where a woman was arrested for making threats in a phone call, I believe, toward health insurance industry people. Do we really want to be defining that as terrorism? I'm not saying you should call people up and threaten them, but is every threat that has, in the absolutely broadest sense, some political component to it, terrorism? I'm pretty leery of going down that road.
Yeah, indeed. Myself as well. We're just getting started on Rising today. Please stick around. We'll be back right after this.